He wrote the most important thing he ever said about friendship in the third letter he ever sent to Lucilius. Not the famous letters, not the ones about time or death or the examined life. The third letter, before the philosophy had fully announced itself, before either of them knew what the correspondence was going to become. Lucilius had written to him about a friend, had shared something with this friend, something personal, and was now worried that he had said too much, that the confidence had been misplaced, that the friend might not be trustworthy with what had been given. Seneca's response is the most demanding thing any philosopher has written about the nature of friendship, and it begins not with comfort, not with reassurance, not with the collegial warmth of a mentor soothing an anxious student, with a correction. "You have acted wrongly," Seneca writes, "in two ways. Either you trusted a man you shouldn't have, or you called someone a friend before you had decided whether to trust him." Either you trusted a man you shouldn't have, or you called someone a friend before you had decided whether to trust him. Two failures, both real, both, Seneca argues, the result of the same underlying error, the conflation of two things the Latin language knew how to distinguish and that the modern world has almost entirely collapsed into one. The person you are friendly with and the person who is your friend. These are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing, and the confusion between them, the daily, socially lubricated, completely understandable confusion of warmth for depth, of familiarity for trust, of the pleasant company of many for the irreplaceable, load-bearing, soul-constituting presence of the few, is, Seneca argues, one of the most consequential errors a human life can make. We live in the most connected and the loneliest moment in human history simultaneously. The average person has hundreds of contacts in their phone, hundreds of connections on the professional networks, dozens of people they see regularly, eat with occasionally, would call if they needed a favor, would invite to a gathering, would describe, if asked without thinking carefully about the word, as friends. And most of us, somewhere in the honest interior of a life that has been building these connections for decades, know that the word is being used too loosely. That what we have assembled, the network, the circle, the social architecture of a life that appears from the outside to be richly inhabited, is not quite what the word friend, used honestly and with full weight, actually means. The person you would call at 3 in the morning, the person to whom you have shown the version of yourself that has not been edited for palatability, the person who knows the actual shape of your inner life, not the performed shape, not the managed shape, but the real one, and is present to it, without flinching and without requiring you to be otherwise. How many of those do you have? Seneca, writing from Rome 2,000 years ago in a city of 1 million people at the center of the most powerful empire the world had yet produced, would not have been surprised by your answer. He said this would happen. He knew exactly what it costs. Lucius Annius Seneca was born around 4 BC in Córdoba, in what is now Spain, and came to Rome as a child. He was trained as a lawyer and philosopher, achieved enormous success as a writer and rhetorician, was exiled to Corsica by the Emperor Claudius for 8 years on a charge that was almost certainly politically motivated, returned to Rome and became, improbably, uncomfortably, with the full awareness that the role was ethically compromising, the tutor and then the chief advisor of the Emperor Nero. The relationship with Nero is the shadow over everything Seneca wrote. He was a Stoic philosopher who counseled the tyrant, a man who wrote brilliantly about the corrupting effects of wealth and power while accumulating one of the largest fortunes in Rome, a thinker whose philosophy demanded integrity and whose biography contained the accumulated compromises of a man who lived very close to the fire for a very long time. He knew this about himself, said so. the letters to Lucilius, written in the last years of his life, after he had stepped back from Nero's court, when the end he could see coming was beginning to take shape, are, among other things, the record of a man trying to live finally and fully according to the philosophy he had been articulating for decades. They are not the letters of a saint, they are the letters of a person who understood what he had gotten wrong and was doing the work, in the time remaining, of getting it less wrong, which makes them, for that reason, more useful than the letters of a saint would have been. The philosophy of friendship that emerges from the letters, not systematically but in fragments across dozens of them, each one adding a layer, is built on a distinction that Seneca returns to again and again. The difference between the friend who is useful to you and the friend who is good for your soul. The useful friend, the person who can advance your career, provide a connection, offer a favor, smooth a difficulty, is not nothing. Seneca is not dismissive of utility. He is a Roman, practical to the bone, and he understands that human beings live in a social world that runs on the exchange of goods and services and the warmth of mutual assistance. But, he argues, with the steady, patient precision of someone who has had both kinds and knows the difference, that the useful friend and the soul friend are not only different things, they are different categories. That filling your life with one while believing you have the other is the specific, painless, long-running error that leaves a person at 60 with an enormous network and a famine. He writes, "Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum." Everything else is alien to us. Time alone is ours. And then, in the same letter, making the connection explicit, he says that what is true of time is also true of friendship, that the friends who are truly yours, truly constitutive of who you are, truly present to the self that is not available to anyone else, are as rare and as irreplaceable as time itself, and squandered with the same carelessness.
There is a letter, number 6, early in the correspondence, where Seneca says something about friendship that I have not found anywhere else in the ancient world, or in the modern one. He is talking about the transmission of wisdom, about how philosophy actually moves from one person to another, not through books, not through lectures, not through the organized machinery of education, but through something more intimate and more difficult. He writes, "I will tell you what made me wish to have friends, so that I might have someone with whom I could die. So that I might have someone with whom I could die. Not someone to die for, not someone who would be present at the end, someone in whose company the death, when it comes, is not a solitary event. Someone who has been present enough, deeply enough, for long enough, that the dying continuous with the living rather than a rupture from it." And then he says, and this is the sentence I want to sit with, "I feel that my good things are somehow diminished if I do not share them. If wisdom were offered to me on the condition that I keep it shut up in myself and not communicate it, I would reject it. If wisdom were offered to me on the condition that I keep it shut up in myself, I would reject it." Not because Seneca was unusually generous, because he understood something about the nature of the inner life that the modern world, with its emphasis on self-development, self-improvement, the private cultivation of the self as a project, has largely lost. That the self does not develop in isolation, that wisdom not shared is not quite wisdom, not fully alive, not fully tested, not fully real in the way that things become real when they have been received and reflected back by a mind that knows you well enough to see what is actually there.
Seneca identifies, across the letters, 3 things that true friendship requires. Not preferences, not personality compatibility, not shared interests or circumstances, or the convenient proximity that produces most of the relationships most people call friendships. 3 things, and they are demanding enough that most of us, reading them, will realize how few of our current relationships meet all 3, and how much we have been calling friendship what Seneca would call something else. The first is the willingness to speak the truth. Not the comfortable truth, not the praise that is easy because it costs nothing and produces warmth without risk. The difficult truth, the assessment that the person needs to hear and that most of the people around them will not provide because providing it risks the relationship. Seneca writes, "A friend is one who will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, what you need." And he says that the friend who tells you only what you want, who manages the relationship by managing your comfort, is not a friend, is using the word for what is actually a more pleasant species of flattery. He goes further. He says that we should actively seek in our friendships the person who will challenge us, who will not let the comfortable self-conception go unexamined, who loves us enough, who is secure enough in the friendship to say the thing that produces discomfort in the short term and growth in the long one. The second thing true friendship requires, in Seneca's understanding, is mutual self-disclosure. Not the disclosure that happens at a dinner party when the wine is good and the conversation goes somewhere unexpected. Not the occasional, surprising, pleasantly intimate revelation of something personal that makes an acquaintance feel briefly like a friend. The systematic, ongoing, deliberate practice of allowing another person to know who you actually are. Not the performed self, not the self that has been assembled for the social world, the self that is available only in the letters, in Seneca's case, literally, where the editing for palatability has been set aside and the actual thinking is what arrives on the page. He writes, "Hocum primum philosophia promittit, sensum communum humanitatem et congregationem." This is what philosophy promises first, a shared sense, humanity, and fellowship. The fellowship is not incidental to the philosophy, it is the condition of the philosophy. The thinking that happens in genuine mutual disclosure, the quality of self-knowledge that is only possible when another person is present to reflect back what you cannot see from inside your own perspective, is not available in solitude. It is not available in the network. It is available only in the friendship that is willing to go that deep. The third thing is the longest view. Seneca argues that true friendship, the kind that is constitutive of the soul rather than merely pleasant for the social life, must be built slowly, over time, through the accumulated weight of shared experience, shared difficulty, shared witness of each other's failures and recoveries, and the ongoing, always incomplete project of becoming a better person. He writes, "Before you make a friend, consider long and think carefully. But when you have decided, receive him with your whole heart and speak as freely with him as you would with yourself." Receive him with your whole heart. Speak as freely as you would with yourself. The two halves of that instruction are inseparable. The wholehearted reception, the complete, unguarded, fully committed opening of the self to the other person, is only safe, only possible, only genuinely available after the long and careful consideration that precedes it. The modern world has reversed this sequence. We open immediately. The first drink, the first dinner, the first exchange of confidences that produces the warmth of intimacy without the substance of it, and then discover, months or years later, that what we built quickly is not load-bearing. Now, the bridge. Because Seneca was writing in Rome, in a city and a culture where the social architecture of friendship was different from ours in ways that matter. Rome had patrons and clients, a formal system of social obligation that shaped who spent time with whom and why. Seneca was navigating that system from the inside, close to power, implicated in its compromises, surrounded by people who were friendly to him for reasons that had nothing to do with who he actually was. Which is, if you sit with it, not so different from the social architecture most of us navigate. The professional relationships that have the warmth of friendship without its depth, the social circles organized by proximity and shared circumstance rather than by the demanding, soul-constituting choice that Seneca is describing. Most of us have not chosen our inner circles, we have accumulated them. The friends from school, from early jobs, from the neighborhoods where we raised children, assembled by circumstance, maintained by habit, valuable and real, and yet not quite what Seneca means when he uses the word. And what is missing, what the network, in the circle, in the accumulated warmth of many pleasant relationships does not supply, is the thing Seneca describes as the condition of wisdom itself. The person who knows you well enough to speak the truth, who has been present long enough to see what you cannot see from inside your own perspective, who is so completely in possession of who you actually are, that dying in their company is not a departure, but a continuity. That is not found, it is built. Here is what Seneca asks of you, practically, today. First, audit the circle honestly. Not to judge anyone, to apply Seneca's distinction with clarity. Divide the people you currently call friends into two columns, not good and bad, not real and fake, but the Senecan distinction. The friends who are useful to you, who provide warmth and company in the practical goods of social connection, and the friends who are good for your soul, who know the unedited version, who tell you what you need rather than what you want, who have earned and received your whole heart. Count the second column, without flinching at the number. The audit is not an occasion for grief. It is the beginning of the deliberate work that Seneca says friendship actually requires. Second, have one Senecan conversation this week. Identify the person in your life who is closest to what Seneca describes, the one who is most capable of the mutual disclosure, the truth-telling, the wholehearted reception that genuine friendship requires, and have with that person one conversation that goes further than your conversations usually go. Not with an agenda, with the specific, deliberate, Senecan willingness to speak as freely as you would with yourself, to let the edited version stay at the door, and to invite the same from them. Notice what is available in that conversation that is not available in the others. That quality, that specific, irreplaceable depth is what Seneca means, and having tasted it, you will understand why he was willing to reject wisdom itself rather than keep it to himself. Third, speak the difficult truth once. There is someone in your inner circle who needs to hear something you have been not saying. Not to wound, Seneca is always careful to distinguish between the truth spoken in service of the person and the truth deployed as a weapon. The truth that, if received, would make a genuine difference to how they are living or how they are seeing themselves, or the decision they are currently making from inside incomplete information. Say it with the care and the precision and the complete, unhurried commitment of a person who loves them enough to risk the momentary discomfort of honesty. That is the friendship Seneca is describing. That is the act that separates the friend who is good for your soul from everyone else who wishes you well. Fourth, make the long investment. Seneca says, consider long, then receive with your whole heart. The modern pace of friendship formation does not allow for the considering, does not build the foundation before the wholehearted reception. Identify one relationship in your life that has the potential, the shared values, the mutual respect, the quality of conversation that suggests depth is available, to become the kind of friendship Seneca describes, and make the long investment in it. Not the grand gesture, the consistent, patient, decades-long accumulation of honest conversation and mutual witness, and the specific, irreplaceable quality of showing up reliably over time. The friend with whom you could die, the friend in whose company the dying is continuous with the living, is not met. They are made over years by both of you, choosing the depth over the comfort of the surface. I want to close with the last letter Seneca ever wrote to Lucilius. He knew by the time he was writing the final letters that Nero was going to move against him, had probably known for some time. The letters of this period have the specific quality of a person doing their most important thinking in the time remaining, not with panic, but with the particular, focused completeness of someone who has stopped pretending that time is not running out. Letter 124, the last in the collection. He is writing about the nature of the good, what it means finally and completely to have lived well. And he writes not about achievement, not about wisdom acquired in isolation, not about the philosophical positions that his work had staked out over decades, about Lucilius, about the correspondence itself, about what it had meant to have a mind to write to, a person who would receive the thinking and reflect it back and push it further and tell him when the thinking was wrong or incomplete that it was wrong or incomplete. About what it had meant in the last years of a long and compromised and genuinely extraordinary life to have been known. He had rejected wisdom if it came without the friend to share it with, and he had been given both. He died in 65 AD, ordered by Nero to take his own life, in the company of his wife, his friends, his philosophical household. In the company of the people who knew him, not the network, not the useful circle, the ones who had been received with his whole heart, and had received him with theirs. He died as a Stoic should, calmly, with full presence, in conversation, to the end.
Here is the question Seneca leaves us with today. Not from the comforts of an easy social life, from the specific, demanding, completely honest assessment of a man who had spent his whole life in the most connected city in the world and knew, from the inside, the difference between the warmth of many and the irreplaceable weight of the few. Who in your life knows the unedited version, has been received with your whole heart and has received you with theirs, and speaks to you as freely as you speak to yourself? And if the answer is no one, or not yet, what would it cost you and what would it give you to begin the long, patient, wholehearted work of building that? Leave that in the comments, because that answer, your Senecan answer, honest about the number in the second column, is not a small thing. It is the letter written to the one person who will know what you mean, and who will write back with the truth. I'll see you in the next one.